What is up, guys? DZ Fear, and let's be honest, Flame of the Tyrant was really bad. The only playable card out of that was the Golden Apples, which, to be fair, is a pretty good card, but that was it. All the other cards kind of sucked, and it was really hard for me to even come up with a top 5 list. And when I made that video about the set rotation in Duel Links being added, where they're rotating out the 2 best sets in the game, I mentioned that what they need to do is to make sets that have good cards in them to compensate for rotating out the 2 best sets. And while Flame of the Tyrant was a disappointment, this set, Valkyrie's Rage, is actually incredible. There are so many good cards in here. I struggled to even narrow down to 10, honestly. I have like 15 cards that I probably could talk about, but I narrowed it down for the sake of shortening the video. But yeah, this set is really great. I'm going to go through a whole bunch of cards here and tell you why they're so good, but this is like metagame changing stuff, and that's awesome. I'm glad that they're stepping up their packs and that they're actually playable and worth buying, unlike Flame of the Tyrant. And yeah, I want to talk about these cards. So this is my top 10 list for the new set, Valkyrie's Rage, that just came out in Duel Links a couple days ago. Number 10 is Whiptail Crow. I chose not to put Dune Names the Dark Witch and Whiptail Crow on this list because I don't think we really need 2 normal monsters. While Dune Names is I don't even know if that's how you pronounce it, but I'll call that. The cover card of the set, I don't think it's super great. I mean, it's 1800 beater for any deck, which is awesome, but I think Whiptail Crow makes more of a difference because you can play it in the Yugi deck, and as we're going to talk about as we go through these cards here, the Yugi deck just got a ton of new support, and I don't know if Konami did that on accident, but there's actually just a ridiculous amount of cards in this set that make the Yugi deck a force to be reckoned with, and I think that'll become like the 3rd best deck, possibly even edging out Water because there's some anti-water stuff in here. But Whiptail Crow is an 1850 beater that you can summon in the deck because it gets a boost from the field spell, so that puts it on the same level as like the water monster, the high tide fish thing that is also 1850 with Yumi on the field. So now you have like a way to normal summon a big monster. It's not quite as big as the dinosaurs, but dinosaurs are a lot more linear than the Yugi deck, and Golden Apples can go toe-to-toe with any of the dinosaurs, so that's definitely something to look forward to. But Whiptail Crow is a really important piece of the Yugi deck, and I'm glad that they added it to the set, even though I completely overlooked it the first time I read through the list. Number 9, I definitely am going to pronounce this wrong, but ZING or whatever. So this card is really good when you go first. A lot of times when you go first, you set a back row, you summon a monster, and you pass. They summon a monster, set a couple back row, and attack or pass or whatever, and this completely shuts down both of their back row. Back row in this game is actually really hard to get rid of, and they luckily added a whole bunch of new cards in this set that can deal with them, but up until this point, back row have just been really difficult to play around, really. A lot of times you just had to run right into them and hope that your opponent couldn't OTK you after it, which isn't really strategic for a game that's supposed to be strategic. So I'm glad that they're adding more dynamic cards that can deal with multiple back row like this. It's not the greatest card in the set, but it's definitely one that you'll want to play if you're missing other forms of back row destruction, or I guess in this case not destroying them, it's locking them down, but pretty much the same thing. Number 8 is Adhesion Trap Hole. This card is pretty cool. So when your opponent summons a monster, its original attack becomes half of that. In Duel Links, that pretty much means whatever they summon is going to be run over, and I think it's a really good card in that it's a pretty good trap to set first turn. A lot of the traps right now require a monster of yours to be destroyed, or for you to take battle damage, or for you to tribute a monster, but Adhesion Trap Hole just basically tells your opponent that whenever they summon that first monster, it's going to die on the next turn, and you're going to keep your monster, and outside of them having like multiple equip spells, they really can't deal with whatever you already have on the field, and I think that in dinosaurs, especially the mirror match, this card's going to be really important for deciding the outcome. But once again, I mean, there's probably better traps in the game, but it's definitely a pretty good first turn option that doesn't require you to take any damage or a monster to be destroyed or anything. So yeah, that makes number 8. Number 7 is Dimensional Alchemist. So they actually added a whole bunch of banishing cards in this set, and I think this is one of the better ones. Basically, it's an 1800 beater on your turn, then when it dies, it floats, and that's pretty cool. There's not a lot of floaters in this game, and while it might be a little slow, I think it's still a pretty powerful attacker, especially in decks that like don't have a field spell to benefit from, or decks that are banishing things for other reasons. I could see decks that are playing like Fusion Gate and Thunder Dragons, using Dimensional Alchemist to get the Thunder Dragons back after they banish them, to then make a second fusion monster. I don't know if that's super viable, but I think as a normal summon in decks that don't have big monsters, Dimensional Alchemist is actually pretty good. Next, we are at number 6. Creeping Darkness is really good in that it's one of the only search cards in the entire game. There basically aren't any search cards besides for like rituals and stuff, but Creeping Darkness, I mean, it has a sort of high cost in that you need to banish 2 monsters in your grave, but mid-game, this card's incredible, and once again, this is another card that benefits the Yugi deck by just generating free advantage. And I don't know, dark decks have been kind of underpowered in this game, surprisingly, and I think Creeping Darkness may take them to the next level, and it also combos with the number 4 card on this list, but we'll get to that in a second. Number 5 is Shinobird Power Spot, sorry. This card is actually, I don't know, I think spirits are now good in this game, or at least playable. So this card gives them all 500 attack, and then when a wind monster bounces to your hand in the end phase, you search a spirit monster. This is obviously good in modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, where I'm playing it in real spirits, but in this game they just added this card and Shinobird Crane. So that means that's a 2000 attack normal summon, and that's pretty ridiculous, but also it gets the boost from Mountain, which Kaiba can play, so then you're looking at a 220 attack normal summon, and I think that you could definitely make a viable spirit deck now, because you'd have a bunch of really high attack monsters that you can just summon on your turn with no cost whatsoever. And then when they bounce back in your hand during the end phase, you can back up your defenses with like golden apples, and then a trap monster. I know that they have the 1600 attack, 1800 defense trap monster in this game. So then you would have some defense for when your opponent tries to attack you. But just having like a 2000 beater every single turn is actually just pretty insane in this game. And I don't know if people will actually play it, because the deck, you need a lot of different pieces from a couple different sets, but I think spirits could be viable. I know I'll definitely be trying them out, and I think that this card, the attack boost, is really what's important here, because it's higher than any of the field spells in this game, and as we know, or if you don't know, now you do, that field spells are the most important cards in Duel Links, so this is like a mini field spell that gives a crazy amount of attack points. Yeah, I think it's pretty good. Number 4, like I said, is going to combo with a couple of things we've been talking already, but Xscape from the Dark Dimension is basically a costless Call the Haunted for banished dark monsters, and I think that's really good. There's a ton of cards in this set that banish things. We've already talked about 2 of them, Creeping Darkness and Dimensional Alchemist. This is just like, this can just get whatever, it doesn't even matter, and I think that's really good, and I think it's going to be underutilized, but I mean, you can just like look at the cards in this set and like realize they're really pushing for Yugi, whether they want to or not, because you have like Dimensional Alchemist, you have Creeping Darkness, you have Whiptail Crow, you just have so many cards that just benefit from the cards that Yugi is already playing. You can now play just dark monsters and then Bazoo the Soul Eater and bring them back with Xscape from the Dark Dimension. It's just like a card that I think might end up being too good for this game, and I don't know, I'm worried about it, but I think that it's limited enough in scope that, I mean, only one deck can really play it, so it probably won't be too overpowered, but I think it has the potential to be overpowered, so I'm going to watch this card, because, once again, I mean, we're now up to 4 cards in this set alone that can take Yugi over the top, and I think this is probably the best of all of them, and it also just shows, like, you can do some cool things with Bazoo going forward if you're playing Dark Monsters in Bazoo. It just gives you some OTK potential, which really isn't in this game. Next, number 3, Nobleman of Extermination. These next 3 cards are all kind of tied for first, but I had to put them in some order. But this is important because this is one of the only ways to take care of face-down back row. I mentioned that back row are really hard to deal with in this game. A lot of times you know your opponent has something and you just have to play into it. Nobleman of Extermination just gets rid of it, and it also banishes copies out of the deck if it's a trap card. Getting, like, I mean, this is a pretty good counter to the Yugi's deck then, because you can get rid of all the golden apples in the deck. But I think this card just in general is like really powerful. It's good against Mikazir or whatever. I never can pronounce that card's name. The trap from the Sea Monster pack that pops a monster when you have a monster that's controlled. It gets rid of that immediately. It deals with reinforcements. It deals with a whole bunch of stuff, and even if it just like forces your opponent to activate it, that's good too, because then they're not actually getting rid of your monsters. And I don't know, this card, I don't know if they're going to add MST to this game anytime soon, but for now, this is probably toe-to-toe with Twister. I mean, Twister will probably still be played more, but this card is definitely an important step forward in dealing with back row successfully. Number 2 is Divine Wrath. So there's like no effect negation in this game, and there are some pretty powerful effects out there. The Leviadragon deck, I mean, if you just summon Leviadragon, if your opponent doesn't have like an order to charge, you basically just lose because they blow up all your cards on the field, and then they have a 2600 monster that just hits you for 1,000,000 damage. And the Gravekeeper deck also have Gravekeeper's Oracle or whatever. That's really hard to deal with. Relinquished decks rely on Relinquished, and so far there hasn't been a great way to deal with any of these cards. But Divine Wrath as an effect negator definitely deals with all of them. I think the discard cost might be too steep. I don't know. You'd probably have to play cards that work well discarding, or play enough normal summons to where you're not going to go down without any monsters after discarding. But I think Divine Wrath, as being like the only consistent and reliable way of negating effects, is worth a nod in a game that doesn't have that. So yeah, that's why it makes number 2 on the list, because I just think it's going to be played in a lot of things. It's not very good against dinosaurs, admittedly, but it's pretty much good against every other meta deck in the game. So I think if dinosaurs start fading out with like the Yugi deck becoming better, because like when a dinosaur attacks for 1900 and then they golden apples you and then it gets the boost from the field spell, that's actually like really hard to deal with every turn. So I think dinosaurs maybe could start fading out as like not being the end all be all of the decks in this game. Number 1 is Soul Exchange. Soul Exchange is something that in the forums that I've seen people talking about this pack, I feel like people are completely overlooking this card. And maybe even some of you in the comments won't agree with me here, but I think Soul Exchange changes this game the most out of any card that they've ever released so far. And that's a pretty big statement. But tribute monsters in this game are really bad. Spot removal in this game is really bad. Soul Exchange fixes both of those problems by giving any deck that plays tribute monsters immediate spot removal and an ability to summon higher level monsters for basically no cost. And I don't think you should overlook that. Soul Exchange, I mean, losing the battle phase definitely sucks, but this just unlocks the potential of so many different decks. It's really good in water too. You contribute your opponent's stuff. It's good in mirror matches, but it makes so many cards that were previously completely unplayable, and it takes them and makes them playable. I honestly believe this is like the most overlooked card from the set, if not the game. And I'm definitely going to be trying it out in a ton of different things. There are some good tribute monsters, not only in this set. I didn't really talk about any of them because they're not super important in relation to this list as being generic, but there are some good tribute monsters in this recent set. They added a whole bunch of them, probably to combo with Soul Exchange, as well as some cards that put themselves on the board for free tribute fodder. But there's also some good tribute monsters in previous sets that really weren't worth playing because you couldn't ever get a tribute monster on the board. But Soul Exchange changes all of that, and if they ever put any monarchs in this game, then like soul control will be a thing again. So I think that's really interesting. But yeah, Soul Exchange, I felt like it just had to be number 1. I just feel like it's gonna be the most influential of all these cards. I don't know, maybe I'm overestimating how far people will go with deck building, because Soul Exchange, I mean, it requires you're building your whole deck around it, but you can play 3 of them, and the decks in this game are 20 cards, so you have a pretty good chance of drawing it with a tribute monster. It's basically just a better way of ritual summoning. I mean, when you're ritual summoning, you're summoning big monsters, but you're taking a -2 for it. This way, you're actually not minusing, you're just getting rid of an opponent's card and one of your cards to summon a tribute monster. And I don't know, I think this card is going to warp the format out of all the cards in the set. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this top 10 list and are excited for the new set. I'm really happy that they added like a bunch of good cards as opposed to just one mediocre card like with Flame of the Tyrant. But yeah, I will see you guys later. Bye.